Welcome in to the Tuesday edition of the 14. I'm Chris Lee. Blake Lovell is with me today. We've got a lot of baseball and basketball to talk about. Basketball just is the gift that keeps giving, Blake. I mean, you think we're going to run out of stories, and we don't.
Never stops. This is. We probably say this every year, but this is the most eventful offseason I think we've had. Not barring last offseason, because last offseason was unique, of course, given the circumstances. But I mean, it's just been wild to see. How many players do we see transferring in the conference each offseason? Not a lot, right? Well, thus far we've had Xavier Pinson go from Missouri to LSU. We've got Desi Sills going from Arkansas to Auburn. Who was it? Ethan Henderson, I think, went from Arkansas to Texas A&M. Maybe there's someone else out there I'm forgetting, but it's just like, man, there's always stuff. And really, even before we started recording here, minutes before we started recording, Florida loses another assistant, and which I can't say I'm shocked about, but Doris Nichols, who was someone that I think was, always going to be in line to get a head coaching job sooner rather than later. He's headed to Radford, which, they had already lost Jordan Mincy to Jacksonville. So those are two really key parts of Mike White's staff that have now, headed elsewhere for head coaching jobs. And again, can't say I'm surprised. Those are two I probably would have put in my top 5 this offseason in terms of assistant coaches in the SEC that have the best chance getting a head coaching job. So, yeah, it's just the carousel keeps turning. And, of course, the transfers, they're not stopping either.
No, they're not. And let's start with the bad news in the SEC. Olivier Sarr has declared for the draft. I guess that's not shocking. He'd been, a college player for 4 years. And Xavier Wheeler has also declared for the draft. Now, I didn't expect that. I heard he might be leaving Georgia. I don't know if he's a draftable kid or not, but he's got 2 years left and is gone. So what do you make of those?
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Wheeler leaving Georgia is very significant. I mean, because that's the thing is, man, when you pretty much make it clear that, hey, I'm either going to the NBA draft or I'm leaving Georgia, that's a strong statement in terms of, I don't know, like what does that say, I guess, about kind of where Georgia's at right now? Because it's an interesting one, right? Because we talked about him, and I think that for him, we said it. I mean, we considered him as one of our top players in the SEC. We didn't ultimately put him in our top 14, but like he was right there in that range. And now, for him, do I think he's going to get drafted? I mean, probably not. I don't think right now. So that probably tells you that he's going to transfer, and where he goes, I have no idea, but I don't think he'll have any shortage of options. But what I do know is when you start to look at the Georgia roster next season, I think we kind of discussed this maybe a little bit yesterday, but I mean, Georgia, I don't know what they're going to do. I think this is a team, because you look at their recruiting, right? And right now, I'm pulling up their recruiting class right now. I know I checked it a few days ago. Let me see where they're at now. But yeah, they're 68th nationally in recruiting. They're 13th in the SEC. As of right now, I think they've only gotten a couple freshmen coming in. They've got Noah Bowman, we talked about, from USC as the transfer. But I look at that roster, and I just don't see where they're going to win games with this current group. And so I kind of wonder, and you mentioned him, right, when we talked about the potential coaching hot seats and all that. Boy, I think as of right now, they got a lot of work to do to probably get outside of that bottom 4.
Yeah, I think Tom Crean probably goes to the top of potential hot seats. And I think that, to me, Georgia and A&M are the two teams at the bottom. And Missouri might be in there too. It's so hard to keep track of all the players coming and going. But I just think that the discussion for teams that are going to have it rough next year probably starts there. And I know we talked about that on the pod yesterday, but this just reinforces it for me with that and with A&M losing Emmanuel Miller, which we discussed yesterday.
Yeah, it's they got a lot of work to do, I think, just because, again, it's how you compare to the other teams in the SEC, and all we've talked about all season is how much better all these teams have gotten. And I legitimately think the SEC right now, you could make the case, I think, for 6 teams maybe to be in the top 25 in the preseason. I don't think they'll all be there, but I think you make the case for Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, Mississippi State. Those 6 in particular, and I think Florida probably is going to be in that mix too, and maybe I'm underselling Florida a little bit, but I think those 7 teams, like, those are 7 pretty strong teams on paper. And again, we're not even mentioning LSU, who they'll have players there. I mean, we talked about the guard duo they're going to have now with Pinson and Seneca Knight. So like I think the SEC next season, and this, I guess we can do a pretty good transition here into what we're going to talk about next with bracketology, but I think the SEC could be, I think they'll be as strong, potentially even stronger than they were in that 2018-19 season, where you had, LSU, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Auburn, like teams like that were really, really good. And you could make the case that all those teams could have made it to the second weekend. They didn't, but you could have made that case, at least just looking at how they played throughout the season. I think the SEC could be as strong next season as it's been in a long, long time. But that's only if, all those teams meet their potential, which, as we know, there's probably going to be a team or two somewhere in there that doesn't. So,
yeah, we're about to connect the dots to the same place, that being Joe Lunardi's bracketology. But first, the one bit of good news for the league yesterday was Tari Eason from Cincinnati. He was freshman all AAC, 7 points, 5 boards for a Cincinnati team that, boy, speaking of decimated, that's where the conversation may start at the Division I level. But yes, he is headed to LSU.
Yeah, that's another one where, you look at LSU and they just kind of revamp the roster and have a chance now, I think, to, be able, and it's so hard to kind of grade LSU, I think, because, you know what they're losing. And I think this is not going to be a team. I mean, I'd be very surprised, even if I know I'm a big fan of Seneca Knight. I've talked about that. Xavier Pinson, maybe this is a better fit for him, but you're just not going to be able to compare next year's LSU team, I think, with this year's LSU team. Like, there's just a difference. Those guys had played together for several years. You knew the chemistry was there. You knew, we had talked about it so many times in terms of where we rank them in our player rankings and everything. But this year's team is going to be much different, and I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how, they manage that as a staff in terms of what maybe the things they can do to get this team and keep this team up there near the top of the SEC, because, as we've said, it's going to be a real challenge this season. So I could see LSU slip down a bit, even with some of these additions they've had. Or, I mean, I would say I could see. I think it's probably inevitable at this point, just based on the players that they're losing. But, still, they're going to be right in that mix, and they'll just only add, I think, to the strength of the league from top to bottom.
Well, speaking of LSU, Joe Lunardi has them, I think, as the 7th team out in his very premature bracketology, which, goodness gracious, talk about thankless tasks.
Yes.
I don't know how much air traffic controlling you have to do this time of the year to keep track of who's in the draft, who's not in the draft. If somebody's in the draft, do we think they're coming back? Who's hit the portal? Who's in the portal but hasn't left yet? I mean, trying to figure out rosters and then size those rosters up and then make a determination for basically 350-something Division I teams is almost impossible, but I guess if anybody can do it, it's Joe Lunardi. Here's what he's got. He's got Alabama's a 1, Arkansas a 3, Tennessee a 4, Kentucky a 5, Auburn an 8, Mississippi State 9, Florida 10. Your thoughts on Joe Lunardi's first edition of bracketology, Blake?
Yeah, if I'm Lunardi, I'm not logging back onto Twitter until next March.
Good point.
I can only imagine what the responses he's gotten already to an April bracketology. I have no doubt that fan bases are already convincing him that he's, all of these other. I'm sure there's plenty of names that have been thrown around, but I look at this. I mean, Alabama's a 1 seed. Not surprised, as I said. I think Alabama's the top 5 team. I know Josh Primo, I think this morning, announced that he was entering the draft, and that's what we got to say. Like, we don't expect these guys to go, but you never know in the draft process. But I think everyone should be able to take advantage of it, and I think this is what you see with players. And remember, they can sign with an agent now and still return, so don't ever let that be the one thing that all the time is like, okay, is he signing with an agent? Is he not? Doesn't matter anymore. They can still come back. So you have to keep that in mind, but I think Alabama, top 5 team, number 1 seed, I can definitely see that. We look, you mentioned elsewhere, they've got Arkansas as a 3. I think that's probably about right too. When you look at them, I mean, Tennessee and Kentucky, those are the 2 that stand out for me. Tennessee is a 4, Kentucky is a 5. We said it. I mean, I think Tennessee, now on paper at least, looks like a top 15, top 20 team again. But can they meet those expectations? That's where you see how all those newcomers are going to be able to gel together. That's the big thing, I think, for Tennessee. And with Kentucky, I do believe they're going to be right back there having an opportunity, to be a top 5 seed in the tournament. I think just adding Kellen Grady and Sheboy and knowing the guys they're bringing in, Kentucky should be right back on track. The others, Auburn is an 8. I think right now probably a little low to me. We talked about Auburn and kind of the potential, but again, that's also based on who do you bring back. But I think with who they have coming in, I really think Auburn's going to be higher than an 8. So I think that's probably one I would shift up a little bit. Mississippi State, even as a 9, to be honest with you, I think I could shift Mississippi State up. We talked about them yesterday. I think they're probably going to be higher than a 9 seed or have an opportunity to be. Yeah. Florida's a 10. That's another one where I think right now I would probably put Florida a little bit higher than the 10, but I don't know how much higher I would put them. Just because I think for them too, it's yes they've brought in a lot of different guys. But it's the chemistry and also what we just mentioned at the top. You're losing 2 assistant coaches and 2 guys who have played a really key role, I think, in, them bringing in some of those players too. And so I think that's something that I'd probably kind of look at Florida and they're in that mix, which I've just included them in it probably over the past, during the Mike White era, because I think consistency it's been something that it's been hard to really gauge with them. So I'd probably still bump them up a little bit higher than a 10, but I could probably see why Lunardi would have them there at this point. And the LSU thing, as we talked about, I don't think as of right now, LSU's a team I would put ahead of any of those other teams. So putting them just on the outside looking in probably makes sense.
Scottie Pippen Jr., if he comes back to Vanderbilt, do you put the Commodores in the field?
I don't know if I would put them in the field. I would probably put them right just outside of it.
I think they're at least an NIT team with him. And look, maybe without him.
Right.
I don't know. They got the Chapman kid from Dayton who gives him some experience at the point. I don't know if I don't know what kind of point guard he is because I haven't seen him play, but I know he defends pretty well, which is something they needed. Of course, they're in pretty good shape in the front court all of a sudden. So it's kind of like it is in baseball where somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And they're getting to that point where they're about to be competitive again. But whether they're better than these other 7 teams, I don't know. But I think it's an interesting question. And I did not think it would have been, 2-3 weeks ago.
You said it. This is one of those years where, like, if you're going to get right as a program, this is a tough year to do it in because I think, like I said, at least on paper, I think the SEC could be as strong as it's been in a long time, and maybe, as I mentioned, maybe stronger than that 2018-19 season. And I know last year we talked about maybe the SEC's Ken Pom rating and all that, but I still think overall for me, I think the strength of the SEC was that 18-19 season, just in terms of the best it's been in a while. But I think this year, you could have a chance to see that be even better, and that's where a team like Vanderbilt trying to make that jump up, they could be significantly better this year. But they could still finish 8th or 9th, just because all of these teams in front of them have just, racked up all these transfers and have gotten so much better, with freshmen and all these other stuff. I think that could be the thing that holds them back a little bit, even though, as we said, if Pippen comes back, like, I think they could be a strong, like, number 8 or number 9 team in the SEC. And that would only, again, add to what I think is going to be a pretty loaded league next year. So I think I would probably still put them a little outside of that. But you know what? If Pippen comes back, do I think they could be better than a team like LSU? I do. Like, I think that they could be the one maybe we're talking about in that next 4 out type range, or maybe, even closer, just based on kind of what they look like on paper. So,
there's teams every year that by virtue of continuity jump up and surpass what everybody thought. I don't know that Alabama is the greatest example of that last year. There's some of that there, because there were some newcomers and everything. But you see a team, okay, Missouri, a good example, right? They'd had the Smiths and Tillman and all those guys that had been at Missouri for a few years. And just by virtue of a lot of cohesion that comes with playing together, Missouri jumped up. I don't think that anybody had Missouri as a 9 seed in bracketology in preseason and there's anywhere. Maybe somebody did. But I think that was one of those that, like, if you stop the movie before the season tips off and you just skip over everything, you say Missouri's a 9 seed, you're like, wow, we didn't see that coming.
Right.
State, I think, is that team, although I think with the bigger upside, I'm looking at this. I'm surprised. They were 316 in experience last year in Ken Palm, and they
Yeah.
finished 67th in the final rankings. That's really good for a team in a power league with that little experience. But you look at it again, we talked about Stewart and Molinar and Toulouse Smith, and we don't know what Adu's going to do if he's coming back another year or not. And the kids they add, I just think to me, State is the profile of that team that jumps up and makes a big move. And if that team, say, a 3 or a 4 seed in March, I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, that's what's I think probably of this entire group, I think Auburn, which Auburn's at an 8, Mississippi State's at a 9 in his bracketology. I think they're the two that certainly have the highest, jump up, like that they can jump up the highest and think based on where they're at right now. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, look, it's and we say it too, like for some reason, it's just that magical jump from guys who are sophomores to juniors. Like just, all of a sudden you flip a switch and you become an upperclassman. And sometimes that just really can mean a lot in terms of already having the experience. Those guys have already played a lot, as freshmen and sophomores. And so now you go into your junior years, as you talked about, kind of the Missouri effect, where you have guys who have been there, played together, and now, you're adding 2 guys like Garrison Brooks, like DJ Jeffries. Jeffries, someone who played a lot at Memphis. And that just, that adds another element. I think starting 5 next year, like Mississippi State starting 5, you will probably put up with everybody in the league. Like you'll say that starting 5 is good enough to challenge anyone in the league next year. And it's just, a matter of kind of what do they get elsewhere, which I think they're going to have some good depth. Just based on the other players around them. So, yeah, I think Mississippi State's definitely that team to look at and say, all right, this is, and you know what, on the flip side of that, like what, if they underachieve this year, then we start talking about, we talked about coaching hot seats and all that other stuff. I mean, there have probably been some frustrations with fans already in terms of them maybe not taking the jump they expected to take necessarily with Ben Howland, only getting into the tournament, one time, and they lost in the first round, as we talked about. So, if they don't meet expectations this year, that's another one that maybe gets a little more interesting.
Okay, I'm going to run down their roster from last year in order of minutes played. DJ Stewart led the conference with 1,154 minutes. He's back. Iverson Molinar next in minutes with 978. He's back. Toulouse Smith at 924. He's back. I'm right on all this so far, right?
Yep.
None of those guys have left. Toulouse, I just said Smith. Abdul Adu is the mystery, right? I've heard some talk of him hitting the transfer portal. He's a senior. He gets another year back. I don't know if he wants to deal with grad school, whatever, but we haven't heard about his future yet, have we?
Not that I'm aware of. That's what I said yesterday. I haven't heard anything on him just yet. So
Davion Smith was next with 749 minutes. He was he was a freshman. He hasn't left, has he?
I don't think so. I'm going to look these up as I'm doing it because I'm like, it's actually, you know what? He did leave. Yep, he transferred.
Okay, where did he end up?
Georgia Tech. That's right. I just remember that. Yep, Georgia Tech. I forgot about him.
Did they lose Jalen Johnson or Derek Fountain? Because those were the next 2 guys, close, both of them bumping up around 400. I'm sorry, Cameron Matthews played 518 minutes, so he's another one.
Not sure.
Okay.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
Well, look, Molinar, Stewart, and Toulouse Smith alone is a massive core of players back. I don't think anybody in the league can match that. If you get Adu back, that's a nice bonus because he's a great defender. Not much of an offensive player, but I don't know that he hurts you there. I mean, he shoots free throws okay, which is not a given for big men. Yeah, I just think of all that experience with the 2 talented, experienced transfers they lost. My goodness, that is a team that, I would put Alabama ahead of them.
Yeah.
And probably Arkansas, but after that, I don't know. I mean, I don't think you could make a case there too.
Yeah, I think that they probably are a team that, like you said, they are the one you circle and say, all right, if there's going to be that team that makes that huge jump, it's them. And I don't know. I mean, Auburn, I think, like we said, I think you see Auburn making that jump up. I think there's still some things to be determined in terms of, who's going to be on their final roster. Because like I mentioned, they did add Desi Seals too. And so I think that's, I mean, Mississippi State, that they've got the ingredients to do that. It's just, I think, can they actually do it? Can they push that far and be at the top? But I think, adding DJ Jeffries was significant for them too. But you have your nucleus coming back like that, and you think there's a really good chance for them to, make a pretty significant jump. And that's what I said. If they don't, I could certainly understand the frustrations with the fan base if they don't make a jump and maybe be even a top 5 seed next year.
Well, here's what I would like to know, and I don't think we could get an answer. I wonder if any team in the country is bringing back 3 players who played more minutes than those 3 combined. And by the way, they're all going to be juniors.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good point.
Anything else with hoops before we talk baseball?
Well, as you were going through Mississippi State, I was looking at Georgia's roster, and I just don't think I knew it was going to be interesting.
Did you wear protective eye gear when you did that?
I'm telling you, I'm looking at this, Severe Wheeler played 35 minutes a game, gone. Tumani Kamara, 28 minutes a game, gone. Ty Fagan, 22 minutes a game, gone. And I don't even know about the older guys. Like I said, you had guys there that, who was it? Like Justin Keir. Those guys were seniors. He played a lot. So, boy.
Keir was a grad transfer, wasn't he?
I think that's right. He came.
Or was he just a senior transfer? He was like Elon or somewhere. I don't remember.
Say he came from somewhere. I remember hearing his name. But
Colonial League, something like that.
Yeah, George Mason. That's right. So yeah, I think he was a grad transfer. So there you go, man. It's I don't know. I'm just starting to look ahead. I mean, I know we were talking about the top of the league, but man, I'm looking at Georgia's roster, and I think they're going to have to really hit some pretty big, home runs here in the transfer portal over the next couple of weeks if they want to be able to have a chance to make any strides next season. Because right now, I don't see it.
I think Georgia's going to be the preseason favorite to have open walk-on tryouts first.
Man, it's crazy though, isn't it? Like, think about. I don't know. Like, it's I have nothing against Tom Crean, but I am one of the people that said, and I get why that maybe it was one of those things where a guy's just been there so long, and at some point you realize, okay, maybe we just need to take that jump. And we've said that in the SEC where the league got so competitive, people are making coaching changes. When Mark Fox was there, I don't know that he always got the credit he deserved at times, but he did have some teams I think that underachieved a little bit. But man, it just felt like that they did not hit maybe a point that, I don't know, maybe I'm just forgetting some of the years, but I still felt like some of those teams, at least from a personnel perspective, which, I mean, look, Georgia's a year removed from having the, number 1 pick in the draft and Anthony Edwards, but even then, right, they didn't make that jump. And so now you're looking ahead and you're like, you go through this past season where they struggled. Now you're looking ahead to a season next year where they could really, really struggle. Goodness, it could be an issue. So.
Were Mark Fox and Andy Kennedy the same guy?
Well, I mean, that was funny because that was always the thing. But like we said, I think Andy Kennedy, there was one, I did the stat at some point. This honestly may have been 4 or 5 years ago. I can't even remember. But like he had Ole Miss in the they finished top 6 in the SEC, like all but, I don't even remember. Was it 1 year or something?
Well, the last year it fell apart on them.
Right. Yeah.
It really fell apart. But other than that, they were so consistent. And same with Georgia. I mean, I thought didn't Fox leave Georgia with the winning record in the league or close to it?
He may have, but like that's what it said. They were always kind of that team. I'm pulling up his thing here now. So he had a bunch of seasons where he'd won 19, 20, 21, like a lot of that. Now, 3 of his first 4 years, he won 14, 15, 15. He had the 21 win season in there in his second year, and they went to the tournament that year. But after that, 20, 21, 20, 19, 18. And you had 1 NCAA in that spread. You had 3 NIT appearances. And again, they finished in the top 6 in 3 years during that stretch. The last 2 seasons, they finished 8th in the SEC and then 11th in the SEC. So that, I guess, is sort of that falling off point. But I mean, we got to remember too, he had Deontay Mayton, he had J.J. Frazier, Nick Claxton, like all of those guys that came through there. And maybe that was the problem, was that he had all those guys and they still couldn't reach that level of maybe what you thought they should be. But they still had a pretty competitive bunch there. And now I'm looking ahead and I'm like, I don't know how competitive Georgia's going to be this season.
Who was the big guard they had that was the player of the year a few years back, the do-it-all kid? That was a Fox player too, wasn't it?
J.J. Frazier? Was it?
No, this is
You're
a bigger
thinking.
guard. He went to the league.
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember who. I can look it up, but I'll find that for you at some point. Trying to remember who that would be.
While you're doing that, I'll look up SEC Player of the Year. But you know what's interesting? He's had 2 years at Cal that are his first 2 years at Cal. He's had a worse record than he ever had at Georgia overall. Now, not by much in his first year, but that's correct. Cal would Contavious Caldwell Pope is the guy I was thinking.
Oh, there you go. Yep,
that was a Fox kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really. I mean, Cal would be. I think you ask 9 out of 10 basketball people, they'd probably say Cal's a better job than Georgia. Although you could say Georgia with the talent pool around you, maybe you could argue otherwise.
Yeah.
But Cal's had better success and. Cal and Washington are two of the weirdest jobs in the country. Sorry to take a sidebar here.
Well,
those teams can Washington could be a 1 or a 2 seed, and then they can be 6-26 2 years later. I don't know what the deal is at those two schools, but
when he took over Cal, I'll say this: it was not in a great spot. That's for sure. They had really struggled when he took over that job. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean they went 8-19 last year and only won 3. But hey, as we saw, the Pac-12, the true conference of champions in the tournament. So it was a competitive league. Only going to get more competitive now. So
who was the coach at Cal before Fox?
Wyking Jones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not very memorable.
Well, it just for whatever reason, it just never worked out. I mean, I remember talking to the guy a couple times for a couple podcasts, but I mean, good guy. Just for some reason, it just didn't work out after Conzo left. So,
anything else with hoops?
Nope. I'm sure we'll have 30 more transfers to talk about tomorrow.
Oh, I'm sure. And good for us, right?
Yes.
That's what keeps
good
us
thing
with
Good thing
material.
we did a daily podcast in this era, because think about it, if we'd have done this before the transfer era, we'd have been sitting here, talking about stats from the mid-90s or something. I don't know.
People ask me, how do you do a daily SEC podcast? I'm like, you'd be surprised. If you're paying attention.
We could do 7 days a week, right? We could do 7.
Oh, I know.
It's just, we're not, sorry, everyone. We're not doing that just yet. But yes, there's so much to talk about. So.
Yeah, if anybody would like to sponsor that, we can make that happen, right?
That's right.
Baseball. The baseball version of bracketology is out. I think D1 baseball is the best at it. No big surprise here. You've got 6 teams that D1 has hosting. Arkansas is the number 1 national seed, followed by 2 Vandy, 4 Mississippi State, 8 Tennessee, 10 Ole Miss, 14 South Carolina. You got 2 seeds in Georgia and Florida and a 3 seed in Alabama. That's pretty close to what I would have expected. I would have said 9 teams. I would have said 6 hosts. Now, you can debate. You might flip Alabama and Georgia based on current RPI. I'm sure some projection went into that. But in any case, or you might even put them all as 2s for that matter. But not a big surprise that you see 9 teams in the field and 6 hosting.
Can we talk about the absurdity of that when you just look at just this league? I mean, how nuts is it? I mean, we know it's kind of what you come to expect at this point, but if you just look up and down, you're like, all right, 1 seed. Oh yeah, there's a couple 2s. It's just, my goodness. It's just, I mean, we said it going into this year, but man, there's a lot of good teams. And I know you guys were kind of trying to, I know you're going to do it tomorrow, but that was part of the abbreviated podcast from yesterday. But it's like, when you project out how these standings are going to finish and all that, and you're looking at the seeding, like you said, there's really not much you can disagree with. But it's so hard because you've got all these teams that are just right there, bunched up together, and all these teams have a chance to, be number 1 seeds, host, all this other stuff. It's incredible.
Well, I'll give you a spoiler alert. I've got a tie at the top as I projected my standings out. And I've got a pack of teams right behind them where, you flip a game or 2 and it gets even more interesting. So
well, there's your teasy for Thursday's episode. We don't even have to sell you on it. That's all you need right there.
Right. But seriously, we said before the season, everybody had this happening, right? I think that people would have said, well, LSU might be in there too, because LSU was, I think, a consensus top 8 or 9, but it's an unforgiving league, Blake. All you need is a couple of bad breaks. The season already wasn't going well. Then you had the Jaden Hill injury. They can't find a bullpen. LSU and Auburn have been the 2 really hard luck teams in this league so far. Um, Auburn just, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're like 1-7 and one-run games in the league, 1-6.
Yeah.
Those things even out over time. Might even be 2-8. But whatever the case is, it's a you're on the margin and you get a couple of bad breaks somewhere and you just get buried, which those two teams can tell you right
I
now.
was gonna say sometimes we've said it before when we're looking at other things, like it's just you can just have some bad luck, and in this league, if you have some bad luck, it's not easy to kind of make up that ground because as we talked about all season with the scheduling and stuff, sometimes you just get a bad draw scheduling wise, and if you lose some of those games you shouldn't lose. Then you're trying to make up ground elsewhere, and it's so hard to do. And that's like we said, sometimes it's like I'm looking at LSU schedule, and I know we talked about it before, but for them to open up with Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt as their first three series, well, you're already, I mean, that's three top five teams right there. Your first 9 games of SEC play, and then it's like, well, we've already been beaten down so much in those three series that all of a sudden we got to come back. And we need to pretty much win everything we can at this point. Well, the problem is you go play Kentucky, which they won that series, and it's like you got South Carolina, Ole Miss, Arkansas. Like it just doesn't let up, and I think that's where we talk about with scheduling wise too, where it's good to play a tough schedule, but man, if you cannot find that break in there somewhere, which for LSU, I mean they get it, I guess a little bit here at the end where they'll play Auburn, Bama, and A&M, but man, if you just have to go through that grind, and I mean, we talked about injury situation stuff too, but it's very unforgiving.
Yeah, I think Auburn really. I mean, both of them are good examples, but I know people are down on Auburn because of the record. I'm going to try to pull it. There's so many kids on that team that won the College World Series the last time it was played.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. I don't think that happens in any other league.
No, it's, I mean, yeah, like we said, it's just one of those where, for them, I guess, too. And I mean, like their schedule, if you compare Auburn's schedule to the others, like you wouldn't say that their schedule is probably as difficult as some of the others either, right? Because, like they play Kentucky. Who are they? Let's see, who do they not play? Let's see, they play, like they have.
I can pull that up. Yeah, give me a minute. You keep on.
Well, I was going to say, like they've played Kentucky. They've played Alabama, of course, recently. They still get to play, LSU, A&M, Missouri. None of those teams right now are ranked. Georgia's not ranked, but I mean, depends on what you look at, I guess. But it's like, that's one of those two where it's, if you actually look at the rest of their schedule, it doesn't look as daunting as some of the others. But even to this point, like I don't know that it's necessarily. I'm trying to look and be like, okay, who's not on here? Tennessee.
Okay, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I'm going to have Auburn winning more than 2 games in the second half. I'm just going to go ahead and tease that for tomorrow.
Well, and they should, because that's what I'm saying. You look at their schedule, and like you can see them taking 2 of 3 from LSU. You could see them taking, winning games against A&M. And then Missouri, like we said, finishing the season against Missouri. Like, I think there's a chance for them to make up some ground. But even to this point, like, I don't know that their schedule has just been overly daunting, right? They don't play Tennessee. They don't play Vanderbilt. They don't
play South Carolina. So they don't play. First of all, here's 2 things that are interesting, right? I think we thought that the West would be tougher.
Yeah.
I think the East has been tougher so far.
Yeah.
And then Auburn does not play the 3 toughest teams in the East.
Yeah.
So I think Auburn wound up with the easiest schedule. And I'll say this, Auburn, I do the Pythagorean wins thing, that tells you how many runs you scored, how many you gave up. That's good at kind of weeding out who's got some tough luck. Auburn had the toughest luck in the league so far. Auburn, according to the Pythag formula, should have won 5.3 SEC games. It's won 2.
Yeah.
Again, it's the one-run games, right? So it's just nobody's. I know as nutty as LSU's season has been, nobody's has been nuttier than Auburn's.
No, I can definitely see why that's the case. As you said, if you just go up and down and go through the numbers and the schedule, it's it's pretty wild. I think to kind of see, like you said, where they're at. I mean, we wouldn't have projected them to be 2-13 right now through 15 league games, but I do think, as you said, and you guys will talk about it more tomorrow, but I think there's a chance for them to at least, I'm not saying they're going to, go on a run here of winning 10 in a row or anything, but at least down the stretch, there seems to be opportunity. Now, if you lose the majority of those games down the stretch, given the schedule and kind of where some of those teams have been up and down too, then you're like, boy, how did we get to this point?
Here's who is still on the team from 2019 in terms of lineup guys. Ryan Bliss is still there. And Bliss was a regular 19. So was Rankin Woley, I think. Bryson Ware, I think, was on that team. Let me double check that. No, he wasn't. But I mean, Judd Ward was still there. I know they lost Edward Julian and Connor Davis. They were big guns, but I mean, that's 2 years ago. You get other guys who develop. Stephen Williams was on that team, had kind of a bad year. And then he just really got red hot and carried them through regional and super regional play, along with a couple other guys. It's crazy. I mean, that's what the SEC is. I don't think there's any other league where you could have a lot of your bats from a World Series team in 2019 come back. Cody Greenhill was on that team. Richard Fitz was on that team on the pitching side. I mean, it's just crazy. That tells you what this league is. Jack Owen, I think, was on that team. Hasn't had the role we thought, or hasn't been as good as we thought, but it's not like this is like this whole new cast of faces from what we saw of Auburn when they were in Omaha.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, it's just the margin for error is so slim just in terms of the league overall. And like, I think you could point to that stretch they had, whatever it was, I guess it's been 3 weeks ago now, where they had that stretch where, they lost 7-6 to Kentucky. They beat Arkansas 2-1. They lost to Arkansas 6-5, then lost again 6-5, then lost to Mississippi State 6-5. And it's just like, man, that's just such a small margin there. If they win, 3 of those games, like the record's not that different, but it is like when you think about it just from probably a confidence standpoint, and maybe you come back and, win some other games here. Maybe you win another one against Bama and that kind of stuff. So I think throughout the course of a baseball season, which we could, we can make the same points probably in football and basketball, just in terms of how certain results or, certain trends can kind of change your season. But I think just in terms of baseball season, we talk about sort of the variance and all that. Man, it's so crazy to think about sort of just the way these things play out. And I think that stretch right there just kind of shows you for them.
Yeah, the good news for Auburn's got 3 home series in the back half of the schedule. The bad news is they're 0-6 at home in the league,
right?
Including being swept by Kentucky, which doesn't really make sense to me, but that's baseball. You have one of those, every weekend, it seems like, in the league where I didn't see that coming. So, I'm going to have pitcher power rankings up this morning at the site. I've got the hitter rankings up yesterday. Got some blowback from Arkansas fans for having Matt Goodhart too low.
Oh, boy.
And here's the thing. This is what we went through with basketball, right? Just because I don't have half your team in the top 14 doesn't mean I don't respect them. You can't see the rest of my list. You might have, Arkansas might have 5 of the next 14 hitters in the league. That's where they get it done through balance. Like, I don't know that there's an easy out 1 to 9 in that lineup. Now you look at Texas A&M. Well, Will Frizzell is carrying that team in a lot of ways, and I don't know that they've got a lot behind him. But that's the way these things go. I think fans look at it and they react, and you shortchanged my team. Well, if you want to put the x-axis there at 14 teams, then I can see how you see it that way. But there's 9 starting players for 14 teams. You get an edge in having the 30th best hitter, is your number 6 guy, whereas another team that it's the 110th. So that's how it works. Look, this is an elite league, people.
Yes.
You're gonna have first rounders maybe who aren't even in our 14 hitters and pitchers at this point.
Well, I had to pull up your Twitter feed as you were going through this because I wanted to get a gauge of where things stood. But I think.
By the way, I'm all for getting yelled at because that means people are paying attention. I'm not necessarily against that. Be semi-kind maybe, but.
Well, there are always some very good responses, some very knowledgeable responses, just pretty straight to the point responses, which I can appreciate. And then there are others, where you throw in the name calling and all this other stuff, and it just it starts to spin out of control. So maybe we should put you on the list with Lunardi. You guys can. I mean, listen, this is what I do. I've barely been on Twitter since college basketball season ended because I'm just like I need to take it away from this for a little bit. So other than just putting stuff on our account, it's Twitter. It's an interesting place sometimes.
I'm gonna make one other statement. If you're hitting one thing and you're a DH, and you're hitting basically the same and you're a second baseman, a shortstop, or a center fielder, and the schedules are a wash, which player do you want on your team, Blake? This is not a trick question. You want the defender.
Yes.
Defense does count. Strength of schedule counts. Conference play counts. And I have put in here, I have condensed production to two numbers: how many runs you've created for your team and how many that is per 27 outs. And that so you could see, as you look through the rankings, the data that I have used. And by the way, Goodhart, I don't mean to make him the poster child of the rankings, but he missed a couple games. He missed a couple of weeks. So did Dom Keegan at Vandy. All in all, you'd rather have the guy who produces about the same but has been there the whole way. So that matters too. But, I mean, look, this is fun. I'm glad people are arguing. I hope they argue a lot more. But
let me ask this. Who else is doing SEC position player rankings, huh? Southeastern14.com.
Nobody.
There's your cell. Just kidding, Arkansas fans. I love you. Just be kind. Be kind, please.
and I'll just say there's a reason we cut it off at 14. Go to the name of the site.
Exactly.
It's a little bit of a branding thing.
Yes.
It's going to be fun. It's meant to be fun. Just because we do not have enough players to your liking in the rankings does not mean we think your team stinks.
Well, you know what? If I did my rankings, I'd have probably 14 Arkansas players in the top 14. So come follow me on Twitter at the Blake Lovell. So there.
I think we need to do an alternate version of rankings where you can do that and folks can just pick the one they like.
That's actually not a bad idea. I don't know why more people don't do that. Just we could all do three separate. You, me, and Barry. We do three separate sets of rankings for each sport. And then, we just even them out, and that way there's going to be one somewhere that people will enjoy. So,
I haven't done team coverage before and gotten feedback. And I've thought about just at some point sarcastically saying, okay, I'm going to write two versions of the article here, and you pick the one you like, and you just take that one as your truth.
That's right.
Problem solved for everybody, right?
That would be a lot of fun. I'm sure we'd have some fun with that. So.
Blake, if you can't have fun, why do you do this?
Exactly. That's what we're joking and stuff, but I get it. Like, hey, I'm all for fans being into their team. You know what? It's there can be some bias, as we know, but we appreciate the discussion always, because it's as we said. I mean, that's the whole reason we did this, right? Is SEC baseball in particular. Like we talked about basketball, it's probably on that same sort of level, but we know SEC football gets a lot of coverage, but basketball and baseball don't necessarily get that, and we're trying to, do what we can to make sure there's a discussion being had about SEC baseball and SEC basketball, and I think that's something that is just as important as anything. It's not always exactly what you're saying, it's just having a discussion, period, in the land of, social media and everything else that's out there. You're just, you're not having these discussions when SEC football gets all the attention, so...
Well, and one more thing, just for full disclosure on process, this is not haphazard. I'm looking at probably 40 or 50 guys from my list of. I mean, I'm looking at everybody, right? I have a feed set up where it sends me stats for everybody. I put them in a sheet. I can compare everybody side by side. I can narrow that down quickly because I'm not going to put a guy, like a hitter in our top 14 that's had 50 plate appearances. So I kind of sort through and say who's playing a lot, who's producing. I run those through some filters. I do the same thing with the pitching side. So there's a lot of guys I look at that don't make the list. This is not just a thing. I do agonize over this. I will compare players. I'm like, should I have my 8 ahead of my 7? Have I got my 10 too low? And then I'll reevaluate. And hey, this guy needs to move up 4 spots, or this guy needs to move down 3. I'm looking at league play. I'm looking at strength of schedule. That doesn't mean it's perfect. But what I am telling you is that it's not done haphazardly, and everybody gets a look. So you might disagree with my conclusions, and that's fine. I'm actually glad people do. It means they're reading and paying attention. But a lot of thought goes into this, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, if you listen to what the podcast we did for our SEC basketball player rankings, like we talked about all the numbers and different. And it's harder for baseball, right? Because there's a lot more. You're choosing from a bigger pool. So I think, it's just it's one of those where, like you said, I think it's fun to do, and you're always going to have people that disagree, but I think just having the discussion is the fun part of it. So.
Well, and I've got Liam Spence number 1 this week, and part of that is I think he has created the second most runs of any player in the league in all games, and he's also been a shortstop most of the year and played it pretty well. Again, when you take a guy who hits at a high level and plays a premium defensive position. For me right now, he's a no-brainer, number one. Now, I think that there's some high batting average on balls in play component that's got him where he is. Spence is a guy who a lot of his value is in his walks, and I think eventually he's going to need to hit a little bit more. I don't know that Spence ends the year at 1, but right now, to me, when I compare him to everybody else, between the defense and offense component, to me, I think, and plus he's really killed the ball in the league. I think he's leading the league in on-base percentage in league games. Hayden Dunhurst at Ole Miss, that's another one. Like, you don't see a guy who can catch and hit at the level that he has. Dunhurst might be my guy that I say at the end of the year who's number one. He's probably my pick, but for now, I think Liam Spence has earned it on the hitters.
Yeah, quite a group. And like you said, I mean, literally, all you have to do is go. If you haven't read this, which we've talked about it for a few minutes here, but just go to the site southeastern14.com, and lots of different schools represented in this week's top 14. And like you said, you could make the case maybe for some of these teams or some of these guys up and down spot or two, like you mentioned, trying to agonize over different spots, but boy, it's still an impressive group, and like we talked about, that's the reason why the SEC just has so many teams right now, and where they're placed at least right now in the D1 projection for the field. So,
well, and one more thing, Arkansas, Vandy, and Ole Miss only got one player each in the hitter rankings. Yep. But if you did a second 14, I think those three teams would be more than half of it.
Yeah.
You just got a lot of those lineups are really deep, and you got a lot of bats that are just after that. You got guys like Frizzell, Connor Tate, people like that have just really carried a lot of offense on teams that don't have a lot behind them.
If we were the Southeastern 21, we could get you 7 more players on that list, but we cap it at 14, and that's what we're doing. So
the math says if we were the Southeastern 21, I might have a third fewer complaints.
I was going to say we probably so, and maybe we're going to form a super league here, like that's been the big discussion with the European soccer teams and all that here the past several days. But maybe we get a super league in the SEC and we get 7 more teams in there. Then it'd be a lot easier for you. So
yeah. It'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
No, then what would happen is people would just be like, no, your guy who's 18 should be 4 or whatever. Right. It would just create more unhappiness.
Yes.
But we're in the unhappiness business, aren't we?
That's what we're in. And I wanted to point out, too, we mentioned the D1 projections. I love the fact that as of right now, obviously, there's, the chances of us getting this maybe are low, but Arkansas and Oral Roberts in Fayetteville. What a rematch there, right? The basketball rematch,
oh, yeah.
Sweet 16 rematch there. I like that. Doing well. I like the tie-ins. That's good. So,
by the way, in the D1 projection, Kentucky, one of the first 5 teams out. So you got another. In fact, they list Kentucky first. I don't know if that's
that's what I was going to ask.
You almost got 10 teams. Yeah.
I wonder if Kentucky's like the first team out, or if that's just that group of teams that are out. But that's again the strength of the league.
By the way, if you talk about analysis and grief, I don't think anybody takes more undeservedly than D1 baseball.
Yeah.
Do you ever read the comment section of their articles?
I stay out of the comment section everywhere, but
that's a good idea. Poor Aaron Fitt. Aaron is like. First of all, I think Aaron, of all the people I know in sports media, I think Aaron does his job as well or better than anybody I know. Second of all, I think Aaron is easily top 5 nicest guys in sports media that I've ever met. And I just read the comments. I just cringe. I'm like, and I like, by the way, I think I know most of the guys over there. I like them all. They all do hard work. I'm probably closest to Aaron than any of them. But I'm just like, man, because I know the time these guys put in. It's crazy to me. I don't know how they're able to do the content and the research they do and follow it to the level that they do. But they're phenomenal at it. And man, they put something up, and it's just it's throwing raw meat to the wolves is what it does. I mean, they just come after those guys.
Should we go back to the letter to the editor days, where the only way you can reply to a story or an article is to send a letter to the editor, and just maybe that's the best way to do it?
I don't think there's any getting the horse back in the barn.
No, I'm just kidding. Like I said, I appreciate all the interaction. That's why I think is, for us, we enjoy the most is, just being that, like, we're not guys who just sit around and like, okay, we're going to put this out and we're just going to sit back and ignore everyone. Like, we like that interaction. We like that engagement. I know that's kind of a teaser for some of the things we actually have planned for the site. But I think that's just that makes it fun too. I know it's not always, fun to get called names and all that, but you're going to have people that agree. You're going to have people that disagree, but I just like the interaction. And that's what I think has always been the fun part of it.
Yeah, between having no criticism and having a lot of it, I'll take the second because it means people are paying attention. So
exactly.
With that, I hope people listening are still paying attention. We've gone on longer than I thought. We tend to do that every show because there's a lot to chew on if you know what you're doing. So, Blake, I'm just going to give the floor for you to close. Of course, you can go to our site, southeastern14.com. See our power rankings for yourself, and I'll let you close us out here.
Yep, southeastern14.com. Check out everything over there, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use. And, be sure to leave us a nice 5-star rating review, that so we can, reach more people here as we go throughout the stretch run of baseball season and really start to get into football and all that. So do that. We've had actually a couple nice 5-star ratings here the past couple of days. We appreciate that. Just be sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. And we'll be back on Thursday with more. And be sure to follow our Twitter account at 14 Southeastern.
All right. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to this episode of the 14. We'll be back with another one on Thursday.